What if the way we tell history is part of the trauma? What if the question, who is to blame, is too small for the scale of what actually happened? Before we talk about nations, before we talk about wars, before we talk about villains, I want to start somewhere smaller, somewhere closer. I grew up without knowing what boundaries were. Not because someone consciously decided I shouldn't have them, but because no one around me knew how to model them. There was love, there was survival, there was effort, but there wasn't language for emotional safety. There wasn't space for the language of this hurts. There wasn't awareness of trauma responses or nervous systems. And for a long time, I thought it was personal until I zoomed out. Because when I zoomed out, I didn't just see my parents, I saw my grandparents behind them, and behind them, I saw war. Before I get into this, let's take a moment and talk about context. Let's talk facts for a moment. In school, I was taught that Germany started the Second World War, just like they started the First World War. Only did it not start with Germany deciding to conquer Europe. It began in 1914 with a single assassination. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was shot. One event. But Europe was already tense. Alliances were in place and armies were already lined up. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia moved to support Serbia. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, prepared for war in response. France stood with Russia. Then Germany made a calculated move. It sent troops through Belgium to reach France. And when that border was crossed, Britain entered the war. What could have remained a regional conflict became something far bigger. Within weeks, millions of young men were called to fight. Factories shifted to weapons, families waited for letters, entire societies reorganized around war. By the end, more than 60 million people were dead. What began with one assassination became World War I, a war that reshaped borders, governments, and the modern world. A chain reaction of alliances, a domino effect of power structures, a system already built for explosion. And yet, after 4 years of trench warfare, after millions dead on all sides, after entire generations traumatized, the Treaty of Versailles placed all the blame and crushing reparations on Germany. Economic punishment, national shame, desperation dressed up as politics. What happens when trauma stacks on trauma? When a nation that is already wounded is economically strangled. When collective shame becomes identity. When power falls into the hands of someone who knows how to weaponize that pain. Germany did not fire the first shot of World War I. It did not declare the first act of war, but it carried the heaviest punishment and national humiliation. And let me be clear, please. This does not erase responsibility for actions taken. It does not simplify complex politics. It does not excuse what came later. Still, it matters. Because humiliation at a national scale, it is not just economic, it is psychological, it is collective. And when you economically suffocate a wounded nation, you create fertile ground for extremism. Again, for clarification, this does not justify what came next. The atrocities of the Second World War stand on their own. They are not excusable, they are not defensible. But history didn't just happen. It was constructed on humiliation, reinforced by economic punishment and ignited by collective trauma. And trauma that isn't understood gets repeated. Trauma that isn't processed doesn't fade. It only hardens, and then it gets passed down. Okay, now zoom back in. You survived the Second World War. Bombs, hunger, bodies, you lose people, you lose parts of yourself. And when it's over, there's no room for therapy, no debrief, no nervous system reset. People try to empower each other with words. We have to move on. We can't stop and cry. No time for grief, because there's a command to rebuild, to get back to work, to be productive, to get married, to have children. Don't talk about what you saw. Rebuilding is not the same as healing. And when healing doesn't happen, trauma adapts. It becomes silence, it becomes emotional distance, it becomes be strong, it becomes man up, it becomes parents who love you but don't know how to sit with your pain. And that is how collective trauma becomes personal. And here is the uncomfortable truth: everyone suffered, not equally, not in the same way, but universally. Every nation buried sons, every civilian population endured fear, every soldier, regardless of uniform, was a body, a person, a human being, thrown into horror. That does not equalize guilt, it does not dilute crime, but it confronts us with something far deeper. Pain is not one sided, and when pain becomes identity, blame becomes addictive. We like clean villains, it simplifies grief, but I believe something simple. If you bring someone the same harm they brought you don't even the score, you only raise the stakes. You don't close the wound, you widen it. Retaliation can feel like control, punishment can feel like justice, but very often it is trauma reacting to trauma. And this isn't just history, this is us. I used to live in blame, and parts of it were justified. There was real harm in my story, but staying in blame kept me frozen. Trauma repeats what it doesn't resolve. I have CPTSD. When I'm triggered, regardless of mental strength or spiritual strength, my body doesn't know it's safe. It reacts like the past is the present. Now zoom out again. What if nations do the same? What if wars are dysregulated nervous systems on a massive scale? What if collective humiliation left unprocessed for generations turns into ideology? Everyone suffers, not equally, but deeply. And the moment we believe our suffering is more sacred, more important, more painful than someone else's, we justify harm. And that's how cycles survive. So maybe the real question isn't who started it. Maybe the questions are who is willing to metabolize power without weaponizing pain? Who is willing to take responsibility without taking on blame? Who is willing to end the cycle instead of escalating it? Who is willing to feel what their ancestors suppressed? Who is willing to take responsibility for healing without carrying shame for history? Because increasing the beds has never created peace. Only regulation does. Only awareness does. Only compassion without denial does. The fire may not have been ours to start, but it is ours to stop fading. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nyx Frequency. If you like this type of content, please follow me, give me a thumbs up and reactions in the comment section, because I'm very curious about your opinion about this heavy, heavy topic. I sincerely thank you for listening. It's really... it really lifts me up, and it really gives me the confidence to talk about all of these subjects in a different point of view. So thank you, and remember that frequency is power. Bye.